What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Bush coming at you solo today to bring you the Week 9 running back starts and sits for fantasy football. As you guys know, on every Wednesday, I come on here, I chop it up, talk about the usage, the fantasy relevant running backs in fantasy, and talk about how the backfields are shaking out, who you should be starting, sitting, flexing, trading high, selling low, buying low, whatever the case is. We are going to cover it in this video. If it has anything to do with running backs today, I go through every matchup and talk about who you should be starting, sitting, flexing, etc. So if you enjoy this video at any point, go ahead to the bottom of the video, hit the like button, comment any of your thoughts down below, and subscribe to the channel if you are new. We're going to hit the intro and then we're going to get right into this. Now, before we get into this, of course, I feel like I need to address the situation because, as many of you guys know, I was a staunch Henry Ruggs truther, Henry Ruggs defender, and he's going to need a different kind of defender now because what he did was flat out stupid, reckless, irresponsible, and I'm kind of ashamed to say that I uttered things on these airwaves like, this is a good kid, he works hard, things like that. So completely, absolutely feel robbed for believing in a kid like that. So unfortunate situation all around. Prayers to the victim, their families, and, hopefully Henry Ruggs, is able to live with this mistake that he made. So from the grim news, let's move on to some more positive news. And we do have some football to talk about. So bye weeks, Lions, Seahawks, Buccaneers, Washington football team. Thank God we don't have to deal with the Antonio Gibson headache this week. Thursday Night Football, the first game that we have here, we have the Jets at Colts, the Fighting Mike Whites, the New York Jets. And in this game, you're going to be starting Michael Carter. You're going to be starting Jonathan Taylor. And I actually do think you can low-end flex Nyheim Hines. The New York Jets have allowed the most fantasy points to running backs this season. They've also allowed 71 targets to running backs as well and 553 receiving yards, second most to running backs as well. So if you are desperate because Swift, Leonard Fournette, Antonio Gibson, J.D. McKissic, whoever are on bye week, like I'm in that situation because I do have Swift and Antonio Gibson, I have to start Nyheim Hines because I needed a guy to fill in. This is a good matchup for Nyheim Hines. Sure, Jonathan Taylor is going to absorb a good amount of that receiving work as well, but there's enough to go around for both guys in this game because the Jets have simply been that bad against running backs and against receiving running backs specifically. So Nyheim Hines, I don't think is a bad flex option in this game, but chances are that JT is going to go hog wild in this one. He's currently my RB1 on the week right now. As you guys can see on the screen, the usage for Jonathan Taylor has seen an uptick in recent weeks. Of course, we know he's getting his offensive lineman back healthy. Quentin Nelson, Braden Smith, both returned to the lineup in recent weeks. 61%, 60%, and 60% of the routes. Each of the last 3 games is all very, very promising to see from Jonathan Taylor, who we kind of assumed coming into the year would just be like a Nick Chubb in the passing game, right? But that's not what's happening right now. Jonathan Taylor is on the field commanding targets to some degree. And of course, we know he has that breakaway ability and he's going to get the bulk of the carries as well as a pretty much a monopoly, 81% on the season so far of the inside the 5 attempts. So great news for Jonathan Taylor. He is, borderline top 6 running back, top 5 running back rest of the season, depending on how you slice it. So the post-bye rookie bump, Michael Carter was a big beneficiary of that thing because this scheme is very running back centric, right? I actually went back and rewatched the Jets game against the Bengals. The way that they were running the play calling, Mike LaFleur was up in the booth instead of being on the sideline like he was the previous 7 games of the season. I do think this offense is going to be a lot more serviceable going forward. And even once Zach Wilson comes back, because they're running a lot more creative schemes and getting their playmakers in space. And that includes Michael Carter. He had a 14 target game or 13 target game just Sunday against the Bengals. And this is a guy that pretty much hasn't seen a change in his usage outside of the bye week, right? 70% of the snaps, exactly what you love to see, but his rush attempts have stayed pretty similar, right? He's been about 55 to 60% throughout the entire season. The big difference is the fact that he's being used now more as a receiver, 60% of the routes, 58% of the routes, and he's being targeted heavily by this Mike White guy, and he's also getting all of the goal line work as well. So Michael Carter, man, rest of the season, this is a top 20 running back. I don't have any problem saying that. This was somebody that I believed in as a talent coming into the season. And I really think that based on the usage that we've seen and the usage uptick that we've seen, this is sustainable, what he's doing, whether it's Zach Wilson, whether it's Mike White at quarterback. This offense doesn't look to be a complete dumpster fire anymore. And that's great news for everybody involved. And it sounds like he's going to get Mekhi Becton back sometime soon as well. So Moving on to the 1 p.m. games, we have the Falcons at Saints, NFC South divisional showdown here. In this game, pretty simple. You're going to start Cordero Patterson and you're going to start Alvin Kamara and also sit Mike Davis. So with no Calvin Ridley now, Calvin Ridley taking some time off to deal with some mental health things, Cordero Patterson is going to continue to be a feature part of this offense. He plays about 20 snaps per game in the 2 games that haven't had Ridley in them, either in the slot or out wide. So this is a guy, not only is he getting good usage as a running back, he's also getting very good usage as a receiver on the outside and in the slot. So mid RB2 going forward, again, a guy that I was pretty wrong on telling you guys to sell high earlier in the season. But like I said, at least you didn't sell him for Nelson Aguilar like I did. So on the screen right now, you guys should see his usage. Again, a guy that is hovering around that 60% snap share, getting a good percentage of the carries, about half of them, and also running a high percentage of the routes. And I do anticipate that we're going to see those routes spike up to about 60%, 70% now with Calvin Ridley out of the lineup, because they don't really have a whole lot of playmakers outside of Kyle Pitts and Cordero Patterson. And if they want to win games, it's going to have to come through those 2 guys. So on the Saints side of things, Alvin Kamara saw a slight downgrade with Mark Ingram back. And now we have Taysom Hill at QB. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of Alvin Kamara managers out that are going to be panicking right now because, one, Taysom Hill is the starting quarterback, like I said, and people were concerned about that heading into the season, how that would affect Alvin Kamara's workload through the air. And with Ingram back, we're also seeing a little bit of a downtick in terms of snaps. As you guys can see on the screen, 67% of the snaps last week, 68% of the rush attempts, only 46% of the routes, though, with Mark Ingram back. So we're going to have to see how that split kind of shakes out. We've thankfully have a big sample size of Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara on the field together in years past. So I don't think much of anything is going to change from his workload. It's not something I'm overly concerned with Mark Ingram being there, but the Taysom Hill thing is probably a real factor. How much is that going to affect his receiving workload? And are they going to use Taysom Hill as a goal line running back in the red zone? Because we have seen Taysom Hill take away red zone opportunities from Alvin Kamara. So if people are panicking, buy low, but otherwise you're still starting Alvin Kamara. So moving on to the Broncos at Cowboys, the next game that we have here. In this game, you're going to be starting Melvin Gordon, starting Zeke Elliott, and you're going to flex Javonte Williams and flex Tony Pollard. Now, Tony Pollard is currently my RB28 on the week. Although we know the roles in this backfield, we know that Zeke Elliott is the banger, the guy that's going to get the majority of the work and also about half the routes and half the receiving work as well. This game does project more as a game that Zeke Elliott is going to dominate the touches because the Broncos are going to be underdogs in this game. Probably, I haven't looked at the spread right now, but it's probably like 5, 6, 7 points that the Cowboys are favored by. And Tony Pollard typically performs better in negative game scripts when the Cowboys are behind, which I don't anticipate to be the case. So the Broncos defense ranking 27th in rush defense DVOA. This one's setting up to be probably a big game for Ezekiel Elliott, and good news for him as he can continue to have a good season. So moving on to the Broncos backfield, though. We know the roles in this Broncos backfield as well. The trade deadline has come and gone, and Melvin Gordon is still a Denver Bronco. That eliminates one of the possibilities as myself as a Javonte Williams owner, being that Javonte Williams would take over this backfield, right? One of the possibilities was, what if Melvin Gordon gets traded? Now, that possibility is out the window. Now we either need a coach's decision based on Javonte Williams' play and maybe the fact that they want to feature him more, or we need a Melvin Gordon injury for Javonte Williams to be the feature back that we all wanted. Javonte RB1 season is looking a little bit less promising than it was in weeks past, but I still have hope. The week 11 bye week for the Broncos, I already talked about the post-bye rookie bump for Michael Carter. That bye week is the source of all hope for Javonte Williams' RB1 season. So as you guys can see on the screen, I've kind of already touched on it. It's a 55-45 split between Javonte and Melvin Gordon. It pretty much has been all season. They split both the carries and the routes in that kind of fashion, but Javonte Williams is well equipped at commanding targets when he is running routes. So that is something that is good to see at least. Patriots at Panthers. Next game that we have here. In this game, you're going to be starting Damian Harris, starting Chuba Hubbard if Christian McCaffrey is out. So this is the first legit chance that we have of Christian McCaffrey playing. I doubt that he will, personally. I just think they're going to be a little bit more cautious with him and give him another week. But if he does play, he's in your lineup and he's a top 3 running back. If not, though, Chuba Hubbard is a mid RB2 this week. We're not quite sure if Sam Darnold is going to play in this game. If not, we're going to have PJ Walker as the quarterback. But is there really that big of a difference between Sam Darnold and PJ Walker? I'm not really that sure. On the Patriots side of things, I talked about Damian Harris as a great sell high candidate last week, and I still stand by that because we saw him have another good matchup against the Chargers, and he did perform well. So that's back-to-back games now that Damian Harris has been performing really well, but his role hasn't changed at all. He's still the same guy that he's been all season, as you guys can see on the screen. 49%, 46%, 53% of the snaps, getting a majority of the carries, but not involved on third down. not a guy that's going to be involved in long down and distance or 2-minute drill. He's just a goal line 2-down running back. That's basically what his role is. And that's fine, right? That's mid RB2, back end RB2 type of value in this kind of offense. But the reason I think he's a good sell is because people are going to view him as better than that because of the recent performances that he's had. So if you can sell him for, if you can trade Damian Harris plus a wide receiver like Cole Beasley, who's performing well, you could probably get up to a James Robinson. You could probably get up to a Joe Mixon or somebody like that. And I think that's a trade that's absolutely worth pulling off because I don't think Damian Harris is going to continue to have these great games, especially this week against the Carolina Panthers defense that is very good against the run. And then, of course, they play the Browns next week, who are also very good against the run. So Damian Harris, his sell window is ticking. If you do want to sell him, then go ahead and do so. But if you do need to play him this week, he's still inside my top 24, although it is a tough matchup. So Vikings at Ravens, this one's pretty simple. You start Dalvin Cook and you sit all the Ravens. The Ravens are top 12 in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the running back position. And this is the first of a couple easy matchups for Dalvin Cook. So like I said on yesterday's video, I talked about Dalvin Cook being one of the biggest buy lows in fantasy right now. Part of it is because we know he's still Dalvin Cook. He's still getting his same workload and he's still a great player, but he's getting much easier matchups in the coming weeks. And his buy window is going to close because he's going to have some phenomenal games in the coming weeks. The Ravens running backs, they all stink and it's a three-way timeshare. So I don't really give a shit about them. I'm not willing to start Latavius Murray. I'm not willing to start Devontae Freeman, anybody like that. So if you have those guys, I think you could probably drop them, to be honest. So the Browns at Bengals, the next game that we have here. In this game, you're going to be starting Nick Chubb, starting Joe Mixon. Again, Chubb was another guy that I talked about yesterday in the trade targets video. We know that Nick Chubb is a stud. We know he's one of the best runners of the football in the NFL. He has the Bengals, the Patriots, and the Lions the next 3 weeks. And although Nick Chubb wasn't necessarily what we thought with the first game without Kareem Hunt, I was super excited about Nick Chubb from a DFS perspective. I was like, yo, this guy is actually going to finally get some receiving work because Kareem Hunt isn't there. Dearness Johnson was still quite involved, but the one thing I will say is that Nick Chubb was coming off of an injury, so I don't anticipate him getting some huge workload coming off of an injury, and it was a tough matchup against the Steelers. So I think we're going to see the best of Nick Chubb this week and the next couple weeks because he averages 93 rushing yards per game against Cincinnati and nearly a touchdown per game. So this is a guy that has performed against this team in the past. They've had problems with him, and although Cincinnati has been pretty good against the run this year, Michael Carter just dissected them basically. So I'm excited about Nick Chubb this week. I think you should be as well. I also remind you that we've been talking about this for 2 years now. What if Nick Chubb didn't have Kareem Hunt? How good of a fantasy asset would he be? Well, we're living in that world right now. Nick Chubb is going to be without Kareem Hunt this week, and people are still going to be hesitant to play him. They're still going to be hesitant to trade for him. And I think this is an absolutely great buying window right now because we've got what we wanted. We don't have Kareem Hunt here. Yes, Dearness Johnson's going to be involved to some extent, but I think Nick Chubb does see a bit of an uptick from his normal workload as if Kareem Hunt was in there. So he's a guy that I'm absolutely buying, absolutely starting. Joe Mixon on the other side of things has a tougher matchup, as I kind of already touched on. The Browns are very good against the run. They are top 3 in rush defense DVOA in the NFL. So Joe Mixon coming off of 2 straight weeks where he had easy matchups against the Jets and Detroit Lions, it's probably going to be tougher sledding for Joe Mixon this week. So he could be a guy that you sell high as well, as I talked about 2 weeks ago. So the Bills at Jaguars, the next game that we have here. In this game, you're going to be starting James Robinson, assuming he plays, and starting Zach Moss. So James Robinson was listed as day-to-day with an ankle injury that he suffered in week 8. Much better news than we were expecting. I was expecting a high ankle sprain or something of that nature. We'll have to see if he practices this week. My gut says, though, that he'll play or he might miss a game or two. So my guess is that he plays through this and he's just fine. But if he does miss a game, maybe he misses one game and Carlos Hyde is a spot start for those of you guys that have James Robinson. Or if you have somebody else on bye, I think Carlos Hyde will be like a top 35 running back if James Robinson's out. But I'm not excited to start him against a Bills run defense that has been quite good this year. So on Zach Moss, he's due for a big game. The Jags are a mess all around. They're terrible on defense all around. They're much more of a pass funnel defense. They're really bad against the pass, but Moss is very involved in the passing game, and the Bills being able to move the ball at will only bodes well for their running back getting potential goal line opportunities. And as you guys can see on the screen, Zach Moss is splitting carries to some extent with Devin Singletary, but the routes are all in favor of Zach Moss. The targets are in favor of Zach Moss, and he does get the majority of the inside the 5 work and the 2-minute drill stuff. So he gets everything that's valuable, just doesn't get a whole lot of carries each week. He's going to thrive off of efficiency. And that's okay because he plays for the Buffalo Bills. If he played for the Dolphins or something, then it'd be a bit more of a problem, but he plays for the Bills. So we can trust him as a top 24 running back this week. So the Texans at Dolphins, the next game that we have here. In this game, you're going to start Myles Gaskin and sit all the Texans running backs. Now, call me crazy, but I'm not willing to rule out the fact that David Johnson or Phillip Lindsay might be relevant for fantasy going forward. The reason I say this, the usage was bad. As you guys can see on the screen, it was really bad. but it was a 24-0 game through 1.5 quarters in Los Angeles and Houston last week. And David Johnson and Lindsey barely saw the field after the first quarter and a half. So maybe the only reason I'm kind of clinging to this is due to reports that we heard that David Johnson might be the feature back. David Johnson would be the feature back before this game, coming from Texans beat reporters. I'm not saying to start David Johnson. I think that's far too risky, but I'm still willing to hold him. I wouldn't drop him quite yet, because there's a good chance that they just took him off the field and took Lindsey off the field because they were getting absolutely mollywopped by the Rams. And there was no reason to play anybody other than Rex Burkhead and Scotty Phillips because there was no chance that they were going to win that game. So Myles Gaskin on the other side of things is a sneaky buy, in my opinion. As you guys can see on the screen, Myles Gaskin had his first game last week with Malcolm Brown on IR. Malcolm Brown leaves behind a pretty sizable share of the rush attempts. As you guys can see, Myles Gaskin did handle 57% of them, did handle his normal allotment of routes, targets, short down and distance, long down and distance, and 2-minute drill. But the snaps and the playing time did go up for a guy like Myles Gaskin. So top 24 running back until Malcolm Brown is back. I think that's a reasonable expectation. I think Myles Gaskin is going to be a guy that's a little undervalued by the opposing manager. So if you need some depth at running back, I don't hate throwing a middling wide receiver at the Myles Gaskin owner, and maybe they'll give you Myles Gaskin in return. So Raiders at Giants, the next game that we have here, start Josh Jacobs and start Barkley if he plays, Devontae Booker if he doesn't. We haven't heard much about the chest injury that Josh Jacobs suffered in week 7 before the bye week. I'm expecting Jacobs to be just fine, though. He's a guy that routinely plays through a lot of injuries and should be at RB2 this week if he's on the field. Prior to week 7, Josh Jacobs had received 17 opportunities in every game, and even more than that in most games, and was playing above 60% of the snaps in every game those previous 3 games as well. So Josh Jacobs is a guy that I think is a little undervalued as well, assuming he's okay and assuming his chest injury is nothing serious. I think he's a guy that can be started as an RB2. No signs of Saquon Barkley at practice today. Apparently he does have COVID-19. So he tested positive for COVID. Apparently he's vaccinated. So all he needs is 2 negative tests in a row to play on Sunday. But if I were the Giants, with the fact that he's coming off of an ankle injury that we still don't know 100% if he is healthy, and 2, he's dealing with COVID. You have a bye week in week 10. Right after this week, you have a bye week. If I were the Giants, I would just say, hey, Saquon, we're going to get you ready for week 11 once we come off the bye. Just, sit this one out. You have COVID. You just get better, get healthy, make sure your ankle is 100% ready to go. That's what I would do if I was the Giants, but I'm not really sure that's what they're going to do. So if Saquon is healthy and is not on the COVID list, then he has a good chance of playing by the sounds of it. So if he is out, though, of course, expect Booker to be the starter yet again and be a mid RB2 like he was last week. To the 4 p.m. games, the Chargers at Eagles. In this game, you can start Austin Eckler and you can flex Boston Scott. Now, Eckler's an every week stud. You guys don't need me to tell you how good Austin Eckler is, but Boston Scott stole the show last week. We were all expecting Kenny Gainwell to be the guy in this offense. But here's the thing. Kenny Gainwell was routinely more successful in games where the Eagles were losing. Now, the Eagles wiped the floor with the Lions last week, so it was a very positive game script for the primary ball carrier. Game script might dictate this week against a Chargers team that is much better and is projected to win this game, that Kenneth Gainwell might be the more valuable back this week. Now, I'm not excited about Boston Scott. I'm not excited about Kenneth Gainwell. But if they're going to be up by 1 million points, the Chargers, then maybe we see a bit of a reverse effect of what we saw last week, where Kenneth Gainwell is the more valuable back and Boston Scott is left in the dust. So I'm not rushing to be like, oh yeah, Boston Scott's an every week starter now. I'm still hesitant on Boston Scott, still hesitant on Kenny Gainwell. So that is kind of my thoughts on the Eagles backfield. Again, it's a pretty messy situation. Hopefully you don't have to start any of these guys, but if you do, just remain cautiously optimistic on Boston Scott. I wouldn't start him over better options than what he currently represents. I wouldn't start him over Darrell Williams. I wouldn't start him over Damian Harris. Anybody that we know what their role is, just roll with those guys over a guy like Boston Scott. So speaking of Darrell Williams, Packers at Chiefs. Now, we got news this morning that Aaron Rodgers has COVID-19 and will not play in this game because he's unvaccinated, despite reports that he said he was vaccinated in the summer. Anyway, Aaron Jones is a start still, regardless of Rodgers plays or not, and Darrell Williams also a start as well. Another smash spot for Aaron Jones, basically 29th ranked rush defense DVOA and top 5 in receiving yards allowed to the running back position. Aaron Jones without Aaron Rodgers on the field. Jordan Love could definitely rely on Aaron Jones in the passing game. I could definitely see something like that happening. Could be another highly targeted game for Aaron Jones. And of course, Devontae Adams should be back for this game as well. So even with Jordan Love as the starting quarterback, I think they can move the offense on this Chiefs defense. On the other side of things, Darrell Williams got back to his great usage last week, running 41%, 54%, and 67% of the routes in recent weeks. He's basically taking over the CEH role, except also getting receiving work on top of it. So Definitely great news for Darrell Williams. I think he's a guy that you can start pretty comfortably as a top 20 running back. I currently have him ranked right now at RB 14. He's a guy that I think shouldn't be even a question mark whether you start him or not. This is a pretty easy matchup against the bottom 5 Packers run defense and rush defense DVOA. So pretty wheels up for Darrell Williams this week. So moving on to the next game, Cardinals at 49ers. This game is probably going to get a lot of steam from a DFS perspective. Start Elijah Mitchell in this game, start Chase Edmonds in this game, and flex James Conner in this game. Now, Elijah Mitchell, I talked about as a sell high candidate yesterday. And the reason is, I'm going to show you why in a second, because his role isn't as valuable as his recent production. Now, Elijah Mitchell, a guy that I think is a talented running back, a talented player, and he is playing well right now. But the problem with Elijah Mitchell, as you guys can see on the screen, is that JaMychal Hasty is getting a majority of the backfield, right? He's getting the targets. He's getting the short down and distance, or some of the short down and distance. He's getting some of the inside the 5 attempts, and he's getting all the long down and distance and 2-minute drill snaps as well. So what Elijah Mitchell is basically is Damian Harris. He's a guy that is a touchdown or bust primary ball carrier for his offense. And his offense is also not like the greatest in the world. So Elijah Mitchell to me lives in mid RB2 to back end RB2 territory. But the problem and why I think he's a sell high candidate is because you can probably get more than that in a trade. Same with Damian Harris. You can float Elijah Mitchell. And this happened today in my league. So shout out to D-Bell, who basically did this trade. He traded away Elijah Mitchell and Robert Woods, and he got Saquon Barkley in return. You can pull off trades like this with Elijah Mitchell right now. He is very, very highly coveted by teams that are in need of wins, especially the guy in my league that has Saquon Barkley was 1-7. So the fact that he needed to win games definitely appealed to him. So if you can take Elijah Mitchell and you can add in Michael Pittman, or you can add in anybody that's having a pretty decent performance, James Conner, someone like that, and you can get up and get Dalvin Cook or Christian McCaffrey or somebody very, very valuable, then absolutely make some trades like that. On the other side of things, Chase Edmonds is still a solid option. If you guys need a running back this week, Chase Edmonds, as you guys can see on the screen, is still getting a pretty high allotment of the snaps, pretty good allotment of the routes for the Cardinals, and is a guy that is highly targeted, highly utilized in the passing game. The only problem is doesn't get the goal line work that does go to James Conner. So both James Conner and Chase Edmonds, guys that I would start as top 30 running backs. But if you have to decide between the two of them, I would go with Chase Edmonds. So moving on to Sunday Night Football, Titans at Rams. In this game, you're going to be starting Darrell Henderson. You guys should know by now to start him every single week and flex either of the Titans running backs, but only if you're desperate. So Darrell Henderson is a feature back in an elite offense. So we know exactly what we're getting. The Titans are about league average against fantasy running backs, allowing the 18th most adjusted fantasy points allowed to the running back position. So okay matchup for Darrell Henderson, but it is worth noting that they rank 28th in rush defense DVOA. So pretty good matchup for Darrell Henderson overall. The Titans, on the other hand, present a whole host of guessing right now because they sign Adrian Peterson as the ball carrier with Derrick Henry's injury, but also have Jeremy McNichols on the roster who's been there all season. If you have both of these guys, if you had Jeremy McNichols and Adrian Peterson, you pick them up on your waiver wire and you have to choose which one to start because you have to start one of them, I would choose Jeremy McNichols because he's been there longer and he gets more of the receiving work. But I'd rather sit both of them and just see how this thing plays out before I start anybody from this backfield. If I had to guess, I would imagine that the Titans are going to shift to more of a pass-heavy approach. They're not going to continue to pretend like they have Derrick Henry still because their offense, when they had Derrick Henry, rightfully so, ran through Derrick Henry. But now with Adrian Peterson, now with Jeremy McNichols, their best chances to win are get the ball to Julio Jones and A.J. Brown. So I'd imagine they're going to up their passing volume. They're going to up their passing production, and that'll probably help a guy like A.J. Brown from a volume perspective. Now, the one thing that I will say, having Derrick Henry on the field is a big deal for a guy like A.J. Brown. It's a big deal for a guy like Julio Jones, especially A.J. Brown, who is predicated on play action production. So the fact that Derrick Henry is no longer there probably hurts the efficiency of him, Ryan Tannehill, and Julio Jones. So definitely something to be wary of, but the volume is probably on the rise for the passing game in Tennessee. On to Monday Night Football, the final game of the slate that we're going to talk about here. Bears at Steelers. In this game, you start Khalil Herbert, you start Najee Harris. David Montgomery hasn't seen a whole lot of updates relating to his condition. So for now, I'm just going to be comfortable playing Khalil Herbert as a top 20 running back play this week. Even in a tough matchup against the Steelers, I think you should be set to play Khalil Herbert with no concerns. Najee Harris, on the other hand, has been ultra consistent this year. He's posted 15 plus half PPR fantasy points in every game except for week 1. So ever since week 2, he's been a consistent 15 plus per game scorer, which is, great news for those of you guys that drafted Najee Harris. I hate to tell Najee Harris haters this before the season because a lot of people were down on this guy, but the reason I was high on Najee Harris was because of the receiving game. I knew he would average 3.7 yards per carry, which is exactly what's happening right now. But 49 targets in 7 games, on pace for over 100 targets on the season. That is exactly where the money was made for Najee Harris coming into the year. And you can make a legit argument based on that receiving volume that this is a top 3 running back the rest of the season. Yes, the offense isn't great. Yes, Najee Harris isn't going to run for 100 yards a game and doesn't have, all these goal line opportunities, but the receiving work and the volume workload in general is enough to give you confidence that this guy's going to be consistent each and every week. So if you guys did enjoy that, as I mentioned, like, comment, subscribe to the channel if you are new. If you guys want access to our weekly rankings, rest of season rankings, dynasty rankings, you know the drill. You can go to the website, thefantasystockexchange.com, buy them outright for $20, or use promo code FSE at deposit and sign up on underdogfantasy.com, and you will get a sign up and match back deposit on whatever you put in. So if you put in $30, you get $60 on the site to work with, and you'll also get our rankings for free, or you can become a Patreon. Patreon link is in the description. Also, fantasy football consultations available on the website as well if you want to book that with either me, Danny, or both of us. So peace out, guys, and I'll talk to you soon.